All right, so if you've ever dipped your toes into using some of these powerful new AI tools, you've probably run into this really confusing pricing thing, right? They're not charging you by the word or by the minute. They're charging you by something called a token. So what on earth is a token? And how does that actually turn into, real money? Let's dive in and figure this out.
And that really is the big question, isn't it? Why tokens? Why not just charge us by the word, something we all understand? Well, it might seem a little weird at first, but as we go through this, you're going to see it's actually a way more accurate and fair way to measure the actual work the AI is doing.
Okay, so first things first. We've got to start thinking about tokens as the hidden currency of AI. It's the basic unit these models use to think and to process everything we throw at them. Here's a good way to picture it. We see language as words and sentences, right? But the AI, it sees language as a series of these little building blocks. That's its native language. And that's what we're really paying for, the computational effort it takes to shuffle and process all those blocks.
So let's get a little more specific. What exactly is one of these building blocks, one of these tokens? The answer might actually surprise you, because it is definitely not as simple as one word equals one token. Not even close.
See, a token can be a whole word, like cat. But it can also be just a part of a word, like the ing at the end of running. Or it can even just be a single punctuation mark, like an exclamation point. This is how the AI chops up our language into little pieces it can actually understand and work with.
Okay, you know what? Let's see this in action. It'll make it super clear. Here's probably the most famous phrase in all of programming. Hello world. Now, how many words do you see there? 2, right? Simple. Okay, now, let's see how the AI sees that exact same phrase.
And boom, this is the perfect illustration. The AI doesn't just see hello and world. Nope, it sees 4 totally separate pieces. It sees the word hello, it sees the comma, it sees a space and the word world, and it sees the exclamation point. Every single one of those, that's a token.
So here's the side-by-side. Our human brain sees 2 words, but the AI, it has to do 4 units of work. And that right there is the core reason we pay for tokens and not words, because tokens are what actually represent the real computational work being done.
So how can you kind of guesstimate this stuff? Well, for English, there are some pretty good rules of thumb. A token is roughly 4 characters, or you can think of it as about 3/4 of a word. So 100 words is going to be maybe 130 tokens, give or take. But just remember, and this is important, really complex words or chunks of code will use up way more tokens. And on top of that, every single AI model tokenizes things just a little bit differently.
But, okay, counting tokens is only half the story. The cost isn't just about what you send to the AI. It's a two-way street. You also have to account for what the AI sends back to you.
So every single time you interact with an AI, it follows these 4 steps. First, you send your prompt. Second, that prompt gets broken down into tokens. Third, the model processes all those tokens. And then fourth, it generates a brand new set of tokens as its response. See? Both sides of the conversation cost computational power. And this is the part you really need to remember. You get billed for everything. The input tokens, that's your prompt, sure, but it's also any conversation history you include. And the output tokens, that's the AI's entire generated response, from the first letter to the last period.
So the formula is actually super simple. Your total cost for any interaction is just your input tokens plus your output tokens. That's it. It's a full accounting of all the work that was done.
All right, so we get what tokens are, and we get how they're counted. But what does this all actually cost? Let's stop talking in the abstract and make these numbers feel real.
So AI companies, they price tokens in these huge batches, usually by the million. A pretty typical price for a good model might be, say, $1.50 per 1 million tokens. Now, that sounds like a crazy amount of tokens, so let's see what that actually gets you. Let's imagine a pretty standard conversation, right? Your prompt, your input, is about 600 tokens, and the AI's response, the output, is 400 tokens. That gives us a grand total of 1,000 tokens for that whole back and forth. So, based on their price of $1.50 per million, what does this one little interaction cost?
And the answer is $0.0015. Yeah, it's less than 2/10 of a single penny. It is unbelievably cheap for one interaction, and this microtransaction model is exactly what makes this tech so incredibly accessible to everyone.
But of course, those tiny costs can add up. One conversation? Practically free.
100 of them? Still just 15 cents. But if you run 1,000 of those conversations, well, now you're at that $1.50 mark. And this is exactly why understanding token usage is so critical, especially when you start to scale up what you're doing.
So how do you get smart about this? How do you manage it? Well, once you understand the system, you have all the power you need to control your costs and squeeze the most value out of every single token.
Okay, let's talk about the classic beginner mistakes. First, counting words instead of tokens. Second, totally forgetting that the AI's response costs you money too. A big one is ignoring how your conversation history adds up and bloats your input costs. And finally, using a super powerful, expensive model for a really simple task that a cheaper one could have handled just fine.
So how do you avoid those traps? Simple. First, use one of the free online tokenizer tools to check your costs beforehand. Second, write prompts that are concise but still clear. Third, keep an eye on that usage dashboard on whatever platform you're using. And last but not least, always match the power and the price tag of the model to the job you're doing.
Look, if you only remember one thing from all this, make it this. Tokens are basically the kilowatt hours of AI. That's the best analogy. It's a standard unit that measures computational work. You're not paying for words, you're paying for the digital electricity it takes to understand what you asked and to generate a brand new answer.
Once you understand this system, AI pricing isn't confusing anymore, is it? It becomes something you can actually control and budget for. So really, the only question left is, now that you know the cost of a single digital thought, what are you going to create?